This video is about climate change and transport, and if you wonder should we get rid of cars and how much impact that would make uh, in preventing or mitigating climate change, let's calculate it. Because nowadays we say the cars are the evil, and if we just get rid of the cars, we can just uh, solve climate change. Mostly just deal with the problem. And they say if we just go vegan and stop using cars and adopt trains, you know, public transport, and the most effective way is basically the trains. That's why I just compared trains with cars. And let's see how much reduction we will get. Why getting rid of cars will not solve climate change problem? Because emissions from car transport are already not where the majority of the emissions come from. Emissions from cars contribute about 6% to global warming. If we consider that we globally get rid of cars and adopt trains, this will bring about a 5.4% reduction in total and about 6% reduction if we account the steel production and car manufacture uh, to produce cars, ignoring the steel demand for trains, because we will assume that we will have we need less materials, less steel, because we will have public infrastructure instead of private. But still, so we can expect. So this is the best case scenario in a way. We should expect less than 6%, but we are just ignoring the steel demand for trains and um, you know such things. And you can, if you tap these figures, you can just go to these links and calculate by yourself. Now we are left with 94% of the global greenhouse gas emissions that we should deal with. That is mostly from energy consumption in buildings, transport other than cars, industry, as well as emissions from unallocated fuel combustion, fugitive, unintended emissions, and agriculture. Now, if the world, so you can just see the percentages for this from I think this link, our world in data, emissions by sector. You can just go to this and see the percentage contributions of all these if you are wondering. Now, if the world goes plant-based, we can reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions by 20%, including the reforestation of the previously occupied land by the livestock industry. That is assuming, this is from the Oxford study, Pura et al. 2018, we all know this as vegans. That is assuming that these, of course, you need to, there is a correction to that, erratum, so you need to just read the corrected paper. That is assuming that these freed up lands will not be used to produce energy crops, which I think they would be given the energy crisis, or to produce crops to increase the human population. I mean, whatever is profitable, because there is land sitting there. I don't think that the system will just let that land be, because it never did before. Right? We know that it tends to grow exponentially due to unintended consequences, and it is impossible to prevent that, to keep in check that growth, because those who grow will gain more power and eventually um, take over the others who don't want to grow. It's a game, and those who exploit the most takes over and destroys everything. Basically, once something goes wrong, let's say uh, there is like an introduction, the Pandora's box is open, the introduction of technology is here, as it is as long as it is here and it is possible to use technology, then those who use it, uh, let's say, in destructive ways, can uh, have more because they are seeing the world as resources, and they are extracting and they are abusing, exploiting, and that's how they can gain more power and uh, you know win the so-called competition in the short term. But in the long term, it is for their they will just destroy themselves too. Um, so this is a well-known fact, by the way. That means going plant-based will reduce the total greenhouse gas emissions about 12%. Again, you can just calculate this from the poor et al. This 12% if there is no reforestation happening. And so keep this in mind that 12% uh, if everyone went plant-based, and about 6% from the getting rid of all the cars in the world and switching to train transport, that will add up to 18% in total. This still leaves us with 82% of the emissions. So I just also mentioned about the plant-based diets, how much it would reduce the emissions. Of course, uh, uh, this is not to underestimate the importance of switching to plant-based diets, because the number one cause of biodiversity loss is basically land occupation, and we can free up to 76% of the agricultural land, and that means a huge win for the biodiversity and wildlife. But in terms of climate change, it is not as sorry. I'm just still showing this 18%. It should be like even if we say it's 20%. In terms of that, this 20% uh, less contribution to climate change is not that drastical change compared to the land use uh, benefits of switching to plant-based diet. Anyway, so just mention to show you that how difficult it is to. So if you just even say that okay, we will not convert this land, and we will have 20%. So 20%, 6%, 26%, and 100 minus 26, you will have 74% emissions still waiting to be sorted out. How to reduce this? So we can reduce the best case scenario here. Fully switch to plant-based, left the wildlife flourish on the previously occupied agricultural land, and absorbs carbon from the atmosphere, reforest those areas, and then we also get rid of all the cars, switch to trains, and we are left with 76% of the current emissions. Still, we have 76% to deal with. Um, now the now the rest of the emissions from other sectors are difficult to address, because these industries, for many decades, have been pushed to minimize their greenhouse gas emissions and increase their efficiencies. At this point, you might say that renewable energy will save industrial civilization. And at this point, I urge you to watch Planet of the Humans 2019. And you will see that uh, so many problems with renewable energy in terms of resources, in terms of, just it is not applicable at a global scale. It's not scalable in a way. So global scale. And nuclear fuel, also this, you can just go and check this paper out, criticizing the nuclear energy, that it has so many problems. It's not just one. It's not just depletion about 100 years, 70 to 100 years. It is not just that. It has many, many other. The nuclear accidents, the amount of, uh, this paper estimates that uh, if if we scaled the nuclear power to a global scale, we will have one accident per month. Or if we just even have 1 in 15th of the power from nuclear uh, stations, nuclear power uh, stations, then we will have, let's say, 1 in 15 months of nuclear accidents, like Fukushima. Imagine Fukushima happening 1 in 15 months, or every month, in different places on Earth. So this has so many, all these so-called alternatives have so many downsides that it is crazy that people are thinking those as viable alternatives to run the industrial civilization. Some say, okay, we can just join all of them and have them, but if you read these papers, I mean, you just see that this is not possible. The resource depletion rates, even at low amounts, uh, it is not scalable. The battery, the storage systems for renewables, say solar and wind, it is crazy if you just do your research. In scientific articles, it is um, near impossible. All these solutions, they are not scalable to global scale. And then we realize that the industrial civilization is inherently anti-nature. It enslaves humans. That's another aspect, psychological aspect, and animals. It pollutes and degrades nature and our minds and causes division and loss of connections. And you can just watch my documentary, The Connections 2021, short documentary. And um, yeah, so just I was very upset. Actually, these were all like my response in Facebook comments. So I just copied, pasted it, and you can just read it. I have already gave, so if this they were saying, oh, your calculations are wrong, and without showing any references or anything, that they were just saying your calculations are wrong, and that's it. They were not saying what's wrong with them, or you just need to, this number is wrong. No, they were just emotionally trying to reject it. And I said, let's calculate in a different way. Um, so you can just read this by yourself. So let's calculate in a different way. We can try to derive this number of 6% by using a different approach, just focusing on USA, and we get a similar result. Europe, my dogs. Okay, let's wait. Um, I can't stop this. Really, it's not under my control. Okay, we must wait until they pass. Maybe there are like dogs or humans on the road. So, okay. Europe is usually shown as a region with dense railways and underground systems, and you can see that it is if you if you search for EU railway map. And if you consider per capita emissions for transport, not just cars, so you can just read these by yourself. I mean, in Germany, the emissions for transport per capita, greenhouse gas emissions are lower, almost half. And if we just apply these numbers, why Germany? Because it is, one of the densest regions in terms of railway. You can just see this from the map. And if we calculate, okay, light vehicle, car, motorcycle, one contribution to these figures, the figures become this. So, in USA, an average, the emissions per capita from light vehicles are 2.25 tons per year, and in Germany it is about 0.99. Hence, 66% reduction in public transport is possible if USA adopted railway transport and phased out light vehicles. Now, if I wanted to fool you, I will just show you this 66% reduction. But because we are concerned with the big picture, right, I need to convert this how much actual reduction happens. So they just fool you with such things. You see, you need to be careful. However, so I'm not here to fool you. That's why I'm going to like write all the numbers in the big picture. However, this corresponds to just 32% reduction in total transport emissions and about 4.8% reduction in total greenhouse gas emissions. So you can just again derive these by using all these links. You can just go and try to figure out all these things by yourself. And basically you just come to a similar number. Instead of, let's say, it was 5.4 before, now we found 4.8, right? And this is not accounting the the steel production, like the life cycle aspects of it. So let's extra add about 1%. It's like 0.6%, but let's say, okay, just let's say it's close to 6% again in total. So there is another concern, that is habitat fragmentation, right? And this is not an issue in cities, if there is no habitat left to fragment in cities. So the argument for getting rid of cars in cities for habitat fragmentation is futile. It doesn't matter that much. But intercity transport, okay, you need to consider if you can have metro systems, that is like for many kilometers you can just dig and extract, and you can just read this paper for how much impact that might have. And may in the long run, it can be logical to do this, and the payback period, I think if I remember correctly, the study was saying about 9 years to 50 years or something like that, or 9 years to 45 years payback period, meaning that the emissions would be net zero. Let's say the the construction of the underground metro systems, and the emissions from that would be neutralized after say 9 to 45 years, something like that. And um, yeah, I mean, the, um, as so I have just added after that. So don't get me wrong. I know where you're coming from, because they were saying we need to get rid of cars. Okay, yeah, I agree, but I am just trying to say that it is not enough. I hate it as much as you do the cars, the car culture. I'm against car culture, but I am realistic to the point that I know that eliminating car culture will not solve our problems much. It might just reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 6% or so in total in the long run. And um, you can say, okay, this is something, and we can just improve other aspects. But as I said, the other aspects uh, are so difficult to improve that, let's say, fugitive emissions. This was a huge part. This was, if I remember correctly, we can maybe go to the. But okay, so let's not make this video too long. But you can just go uh, to this link here, our world in data, emissions by sector, and these fugitive emissions were, I think, close to the like 6%, 7%. So they were like uh, as much as the benefits that we are talking here. And they can't be prevented. They are unintended emissions, and the industry already tries to minimize them to be able to increase the profits. So they are not possible to get rid of. What about um, unallocated fuel combustion? This was also a huge part, uh, and people will keep using this fuel for various reasons. Um, you know, um, because there is no alternative energy source that can be scaled globally. And agriculture, okay, we just said we can improve agriculture. That's fine. What about industry? The industry, as we know, it tries to increase efficiency for many decades. This is the goal of the industry, to increase internal efficiency as much as possible to make the most profits, right? So it's not possible to have much contribution to have much improvements there. Um, okay, so transport, we said, okay, because they are like private, so they can sell you cars and fuels, etc. So transport is possible. We just saw it. We can just reduce by 6%. And buildings, well, is very difficult again because there are many uh, efforts on about energy saving build in buildings, the isolation, etc. So this is very difficult to improve, and that's all, right? We just went through all, and we could like improve agricultural emissions by going plant-based, and um, then transport. Uh, yeah, we can improve those, and that's all that we can improve with climate change. That's why we are doomed, basically. We can just drop to, let's say, what was it, 70? What was this? 76%? You were saying? No, 74%. We can drop to 74%, and if we don't consume less, if we keep like this, if we expect living like this, I mean, having a fridge and all these luxuries that we have today, if you don't want to give up, you can't expect reducing it more than 74%. And that's that's why this situation is very difficult. And okay, let's assume that also some renewables, wind and maybe nuclear, will come into play. And of course, they are not scalable at a global scale, but they can take this number, let's say the 74%, a little bit more down. Maybe they can just contribute to, I don't know, maybe 10%, 15, 20%, let's say. And we can maybe halve the emissions at maximum. I mean, I didn't calculate the scalability of this, but surely this will not be, these solutions will not be sustainable either. I mean, you can just understand it when you just watch this documentary. It's a well-made documentary. Shows the absurdity of all this, and and if you just consider that at uh, sometimes the building of all this infrastructure for solar and wind actually um, doesn't lead to a decrease in emissions. So maybe still it will stay at 74% because Germany adopted wind and solar, etc., the wind energy, right? And some nuclear and wind, but still uh, its emissions, CO2 emissions, are still unchanged. It is still high. It didn't drop. Why? Because they need backup systems, and they are burning natural gas and coal for to back up the wind. And this is, and also they need to build those extra infrastructure. So they need to have fossil fuel powered energy systems as a backup, and also an extra wind and solar facilities, all this infrastructure, and they need energy to build. And maybe that just probably that just offsets the benefits that come from wind and solar. So um, this is not a. It doesn't look good. You know what I mean? So definitely you can just go and watch this now if you haven't watched this Planet of the Humans 2019, and you can go watch my documentary, etc. Just they they will try to blame things, the minute minuscule things, instead of addressing the whole system, because they want to keep this system. And uh, if the system switches to trains instead of cars, still the system doesn't get affected too much, right? It's an efficient, the trains are more efficient, right? It is good for the system. From the industrial systems perspective, it's just increasing the efficiency of its transport, right? So um, that would also, from the Jevons paradox, that would mean that probably people will build more trains to maximize, and so this 6% reduction is not guaranteed. The people will still want to travel more, etc. So the Jevons paradox uh, will this exponential tendency for exponential growth will probably even undo this 6% reduction too. So it is. You can just search Jevons paradox. I will just write it here quickly. Jevons paradox. Okay, this is a well observed phenomenon. If you increase efficiency, people will consume more. So, I mean, what's the point of all this, right? Um, Nothing. It's just a big suicidal machine that is causing the sixth mass extinction and eventually threatening us with making us go extinct with our own extinction. Thank you very much for listening, and let me just also write my documentary's name. If you are new here in this channel, I mean, it is very surprising that you didn't heard about this documentary, you didn't hear about this documentary until now. But the Connexus 2021 short documentary is also on my channel, and um, don't be optimistic, be realistic, be vegan, be anti-technology, and be minimalist. Love nature, connect with nature, find yourself through nature, and take care.